My name is Daniel Serwer. I'm a professor here at Johns Hopkins SAIS, as well as a scholar at the Middle East Institute. And so it's a particular pleasure for me to welcome Ambassador Lukman Faily and a co-professor here at SAIS, Abbas Kadhim, to this session on the future of Iraq. We're meeting at a time of particular sensitivity for a country that many of us have been engaged with one way and another. For many years, I made many trips into Iraq during the period 2004-2010. I know others may have been on the ground as troops there. Others are native to Iraq, and I think it's fair to say that we are all concerned with this country's future. Let me introduce Abbas, and then he will introduce the ambassador. Abbas is a colleague at SAIS at the Foreign Policy Institute. He's a Berkeley PhD, a former professor at the Naval Postgraduate School, a former employee at the Iraqi Embassy, but most importantly for today, a real expert on sectarian and ethnic relations in Iraq, which I think it's fair to say he doesn't think are always bad.
It's good for me.
It's a pleasure to have Abbas with us, and he will introduce the ambassador. The ambassador will make remarks, and then we'll take Q&A from the audience. Abbas.
Thank you, Professor Serwer, for this introduction and for putting together this timely and important panel, and also for inviting a man who is really, I feel great respect and appreciation of. Dr. Serwer has asked me to wear a couple of hats on this panel. I will do that. First, Ambassador Faily comes from a long line of the excellence of Iraqi diplomacy when we think about it from the days of the monarchy until these days. We have names that are to be proud of as Iraqis, and one can think of people like Noor Saeed, like Fadl Jamali, like Adnan Pachachi, and definitely our guest of honor today. Ambassador Faily has a long and impressive CV. I'm not going to go through because it is already in the announcement. I am going to just highlight a couple of things just to mention that he combines both the work of previous opposition to dictatorship and oppression in Iraq, where he spent a lot of his time. He has lived in the UK for over 20 years, doing two things. One of them, again, carrying the causes of Iraq, heavy as they are, on his shoulders. Meanwhile, doing a lot for personal excellence, where he pursued very impressive agenda of education that you have in your in his biography, also including degrees in the mathematics and business management. He is an engineer of sorts, and he also has served in the diplomatic field, and first in Japan between 2010 and 2013, doing an excellent job there. You always get given a harder job. So his reward was the hardest job of any ambassador who would have, being an ambassador to the United States of America. And it is an honor also. Such a recognition doesn't come to many people. He came in 2013, started, I believe, July of 2013 officially as an ambassador. I am biased towards Ambassador Faily. I worked with him between 2013 and 2014. Getting close to him personally, I found him to be an intellectual of a genuine type. He is a real intellectual when you talk about the good intellectuals, and those are rarities in the Middle East these days. Also, he is a highly professional, very good and demanding, in the positive sense of demanding, of his team and crew. He is also an amazingly kind man and down to earth, and a good family man, I must say, also, having known that side of him. He also is the only one I know of among those ambassadors to the United States who runs a marathon. So, you know, you are talking about someone who is very hard to catch if you are trying to chase him in any way, intellectually or in the athletic field. It is my distinct honor to sit next to him and to introduce him to you. And after he speaks, we will start the rest of the panel. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for coming.
Good afternoon, everybody. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. First of all, let me thank Professor Dan for his introduction and the opportunity. I was recently speaking to his own special class, one of the floors up there, and we discussed Iraq in I would say, in a very diverse, focused, and productive with the students. With the students, you usually enjoy the session because you never know what are the normal narrative and how do they view lives, with their simplicity of background or with the complexity of what they read in their literature. So thank you, Dan, and thank you, Abbas, for your introduction. It was a lot of music to my ears. I didn't want you to stop, but anyway, that's the reality of life. I'm honored in a number of ways. To talk to a diverse audience, also for the media, and also to talk about it in just a week before the Prime Minister's visit here. We hope for our Prime Minister to have his first official visit to the United States next week for a 4-day visit, in which he will have discussions around the topics which we're talking about today, and I'm sure your Q&A will highlight that, which is, where are we going with Iraq? It started as a project in 2003 in relation to as far away from dictatorship as possible and as near as possible to democratic, free, market economy driven, defined by a unified constitution, highlighting federalism, talking about freedom, expression, democracy, and all those features which a lot of nations take for granted, which was what I might call a dream to any Iraqi to think that he can even have such a discussion, let alone for him to practice it. That has been a key feature for us. Over the last 12 years, what have we done so that we can define how do we move forward? Obviously, talking about the future of Iraq is a very difficult topic for anybody, even for myself, mainly because there are so many parameters which control the path of a nation. It's not just that what resources they have or remaining to have, or the region, how supportive or not it is, or how much focused in the country is for the unity of the country, or what national project we have all, which we can talk about nation states or nationalism and others, or the international supports we have or we will get, or a precondition to get for us to develop and with the future. If anybody can tell you the future of Iraq within a decade or more, then I'm afraid he will move more into the fiction than the reality, because these are so many parameters. I can also assure you that those Iraqis who were involved in 2003 project may not have the same belief they do now, based on the reflection of that country, not in relation to the dream. That's always there. The Iraqis' dream has been what I might call the catalyst of why we've been able to survive so many tsunamis in political, socio-economical sense we have had over the last decade or 12 years. Bearing in mind also that that dream is always there and will always be there. Simply because the nation, regardless of whether it's the borders, we're talking about that, and people say this is only a 100-year border. As a communities, they have more or less every day realize more and more that they have interdependencies among each other. The Kurds were talking about having their own country. Post ISIS, I would doubt that now. Certainly in the immediate, within the next decade or so. That's still outstanding questions. The majority of the Shia thought that they can govern post ISIS. They are certainly finding out that the inclusion aspect, the requirement for the nation to suffice its key foundations of the adherence to the constitution in spirit and literacy is a key challenge. Majority of the remaining societies, such as minorities and others, they thought that they may not need to be involved in the politics, and that in itself should keep them safe. And they found that with ISIS, with ISIL, with the sectarian narrative in the region and other isms in the region, that they cannot feel safe by their own. They need to be part of the political discourse. And let's not forget what people here in DC call them the Arab Sunnis. That as well, they are trying to find a new social contract with each other. If somebody asks me, do you really need to have this discussion after 12 years of post-Saddam? I will say, well, we've just started that discussion. At a very high cost in the stability, the politics of Iraq, true, we're not doubting that. But when you look at nations, what is a decade in terms of nations? What is a decade in terms of a vision of a country where they're talking about moving us to the other end of the pendulum with the heritage of Saddam Hussein? Here, I'm not blaming anybody, but I'm also aware and wary that after a decade post-Saddam Hussein's rule, majority of our populations do not know about Saddam's rule. Because if they're born after 1990, which they have something like 60% of our population are young, then they wouldn't know Saddam Hussein. We, as in governing Iraq, we cannot go and put the blame on Saddam Hussein. Even if he is blamed, we know he's blamed because of the social engineering he did in what we see now in the disputed territories, or in the dictatorship, or in socially destroying the fabric of society by culture of war and violence. We know that. Nobody's disputing that. So for the academia, it's clear-cut where are the foundations and who supported it or not. But for the society, our young ones who seek to be employed and who seek to have a job and so on, and who, by the way, are very active in social media. So they have a very good awareness of what are taking place in the region and elsewhere. They have that question. We in Iraq need to answer that question. Post, current, and future generations need to ask that question. I will talk about it in sort of 5 parameters, and I think I should finish in about 10 minutes. First is, I'll give you an observation of my trip. I came back yesterday, an 8-day trip in Iraq. I saw quite a few people, and we had our ambassadors conference. So I was able to get a good grasp from all the top officials who came to our conference as to the status of the country. I will also talk about the recent military operation in the Salahuddin, and specifically in the city of Tikrit. And finally, I'll talk about the 5, what I might call the government focus or vision moving forward. Those 5 points are in relation to inclusion or decision-making, and in relation to military capabilities, in relation to combating corruption and developing the economy, national reconciliation, and finally our foreign policy relation issues, which would be highlighted by next week's visit by the Prime Minister. In my visit, which I came, as I said, only yesterday, and I've been there about 3 months ago as well, so I was able to do good compare and contrast. It was clear to me that the country, in a very ironic way, with all the ISIS and all the media, Iraq being at the focal point, the country, at least in Baghdad and a lot of other cities, felt that they are at the safest point they have been for a long time. Very few car bombings, assassinations, no clear militia or anybody in the streets, free what you might call curfews no longer there, and removing a lot of blocks, concrete blocks. So free traffic. That was one of the key highlights I realized from day one. Obviously, being sort of the spring, the weather was the best part of the year, so that helps as well. So it was important that everybody talked about not just Tikrit and where the Allies come in or not, but also what is the post-ISIS scenario. And to me, this early on in our engagement with ISIS, with them still having occupying Mosul, Nineveh, and Anbar, I would say it's a healthy discussion to have. I started having it 6 months ago, but for the majority of the people who are not politically savvy enough to talk about what's the scenario post-ISIS in relation to National Guard and everything else, I think that's a good, healthy political position to be in. The other key point was, how do we all stabilize and strengthen the government? Prime Minister Ebadi is new to this position. He certainly doesn't have what you might call a healthy environment to start governing from, because he came in the trail of the Mosul and the elections and everything else. So how can we help him? That was one of the key issues. Majority of the politicians were sometimes frustrated by their, not lack of ability, but that they sometimes try to offer a help, but it's not materialized because of the politics. So that was what I might call a positive sign of frustration. The Tikrit operation, it was also clear when as an ambassador coming from the United States, people will ask me, why the United States not doing X, Y, and Z? And that we can talk about what are these X, Y, and Z items are. But primarily looking at the United States as a prime partner in our fight against ISIS. Here we're talking about Iraq, by the way. The American perspective might be the geopolitics of the region and Syria and everything else. To the Iraqis, they don't appreciate that. They say, we have a problem with ISIS. You need to help us now. Syria, everything else, good. We need to resolve that. But we have an immediate threat because we cannot coexist with ISIS. So help us now with your intensive campaigns, with your military, with your training, with the ammunition, with everything else. That's another issue to take into account. Obviously, the politics of DC is not an area of concern for them, nor, to be honest, of interest. They're not. Congressional discussions and others, that's not their concern. And I would say I think they are right in that sense, because of the menace of ISIS. That's an area which I think is important for people to appreciate. So in that sense, the Tikrit operation was what you might call a roller coaster, where it was primarily done by Iraqis with support from volunteers, people mobilization forces, and obviously support from our neighbor in the advisors and so on. Then there was a halt, and then the US campaign and others playing part, a significant part, an effective part, and then more or less everybody working together in the liberation of the city of Tikrit. The key concern for the government was in minimizing collateral damage and Iraqi forces. So it was not just people, properties and so on. ISIS were able to booby trap hundreds of houses, posts, and other type of things. So it was not an easy terrain to walk in. So in a way, what key issues we took away from that operation was that we need to have a closer cooperation with our neighbors. Each theater is unique, and therefore what took place in Tikrit may not have to be copied in Nineveh or in Anbar, but we have to learn from. And thirdly, we need each other. But the good news out of that was primarily that the tribes in the region, primarily the Arab tribes of Jubur and others, significantly worked with the Popular Mobilization Forces and the Iraqi security. So there was a clear engagement. And also, even few days after the liberation, it was handed over to the provisional government and for the civil society to manage. And those popular mobilizations, and sometimes I hear they call them militia, pulled out of it. And we'll talk about that wording of militia, I hope, later on. The third point, which is the 5-point vision, and then I'll finish with it. The key government issues are, first of all, to make sure that the government is inclusive. The Prime Minister does seriously believe in decentralization, and he seriously believes in cabinet making decisions. He seriously sometimes delays decisions where to the frustration of partners because he says, I haven't got the buy-in of X, Y, or Z. So he's that. He's not where he will make a decision himself and say, sort of tough luck to the rest. He's not that type. So that's what I think has been, people are appreciative of that. It's, as I said, the sense of urgency, sometimes people want him to make that decision, and he usually says, I need to be more inclusive to mitigate the risk in the day after scenario. And that's one aspect. As to the military, there has been major restructure, more to come, I can assure you of that, in the military and in the Interior Ministry of Interior. There has been more hand-on role for the Prime Minister and the military. They certainly have tried to outreach to the trainings of the tribes, whether it's Ambar tribes or in Nainawa and others as well. The discussions in relation to National Guard has taken place. First draft, more to do. People ask me, one senior official once asked me to talk about the National Guard and the, what do you call it, the debathification. I forgot the English name for it. Accountability and justice. Oh. The debathification. He asked me about that. He said, where are you with them? And we want the signs. And I said that debathification is a history aspect. National Guard is our future. That's where people have to bear in mind. People now no longer talk about debathification. If they do, it's more of a sort of unhappiness or perceived justice didn't take place. But it's no longer a showstopper. National Guard? No. That's a key issue of how do we demobilize the military, those who are at the peripheral, whether they are the volunteers or any other type of military establishment in Iraq, and how do we integrate them into the government, and how do we let the commander-in-chief, the Prime Minister, to manage that. That's where the future is, and it will take time. People pushed us on time, and I kept saying, we wouldn't do it to your timeline. We will do it to our own timeline. So in that sense, reforms are taking place, providing weapons to the tribes and others. It's not to the pace because we haven't got the weapons ourselves. It's not that we have them and store them. We're not playing politics with that. It's a pure logistical problems we have. Because bear in mind, we also have a financial crisis, which means that we don't have the luxury of the funds and we can't just buy any weapons in the market. It has to take some time. There also been a significant, what I might call earlier, significant reduction in violence. There were, for a time, some, what you might call, people want to take advantage of the security lack and do ransoms and kidnapping and so on. That's more or less significantly reduced. Now, the 2 or 3 other points before I'll finish. That's to do with the economy. The budget was signed, and we still do 1 year at a time budget. It's not a 5-year plan or anything like that, which means that, unfortunately, we still catch up. We're still in a catch-up mode. And that's not help us in our development. There has been what I might call initial signs of development, economical development. Corruption is still a major challenge. We have more or less only now touched the surface of that. It's an issue of culture, it's an issue of structure, it's an issue of processes need to change, and certainly legislations have to be there. And we need to move away from the current 3 methods of monitor into more what I might call an integrated approach. And I can talk about that later on. However, what has taken place as well is major steps from the Prime Minister's initiative in relation to decentralization and administrative reform. That will certainly be the way forward, including what I might call the taking away some ministries and diverging them into the local authorities. That's also a plan. As far as reconciliation, the Prime Minister came yesterday from Erbil. It's the first trip he did as a Prime Minister. The steps have taken was very positive, but they're all in what I call them in the theme of confidence building measures, i.e. we do one step at a time, rather than have a package solution in which we all sign it in blood. That's not the culture in Iraq now. It's more like step by step, because after Mosul and after the new formation, an issue of trust had to be regenerated. The communities of Iraq now realize that they have interdependencies. But at the same time, the maturity of the politics has not allowed for a predictability of that politics. And I can talk about that in a few times. So you have to be cautious, and you have to think twice, and you have to take into account myriad of issues rather than a few parameters for your decision making. And that's one of the complexities of Iraq. As far as also human rights abuses and so on, that has been a major focus for the Prime Minister. He has really opened up, and he has called for international organizations to be there on the ground, support as possible. And we're not saying that abuses are not taking place. We're saying that we're there to monitor, and to, once an abuse is taking place, for us to be aware of it in facts and figures, not in perceptions or rumors, that for us to do something about it. So at least we have that understanding, and I might call it, we have that big chest where we can say, tell us what has taken place, and we will look into that, rather than say that these are driven by whatever other sort of negative connotations we have toward the international media or others as well. We're saying that's not the case. But at the same time, please bear in mind, our war is a messy war. All wars are messy, I know that. But what we have is not a trench war. We have a street war. We have an enemy who doesn't wear uniforms, who doesn't show themselves, and who are conniving and have more or less broken every rule of engagement of any ethics of any war to achieve their objectives. This is the type of fighting we have to do. And unfortunately, casualties are there. It's unacceptable. It has to be zero tolerance. But please bear in mind that's the environment we're working on. So the final point is about relationship with foreign countries and others. The Prime Minister and the Cabinet have been very active in doing an outreach to all countries. He has been tremendous jobs in going to all the major conferences, where I know for a fact that previous Prime Minister didn't, for language barriers and for other things. But Prime Minister Ebadi has done a tremendous job of reaching out, and more so by accepting delegations. And his trip to the United States is one sign of that. The key message we have is that we know we have a relationship with neighbors we need to address. We know there are camps where there is pro-Iranian, pro-American, pro-Saudi, pro-others. But we are key partner in that region. We can be a partner to anybody who wants us to partner with him in the fight against terrorism, against sectarianism and others. We are there. We will still be there. Iran will always be our neighbor. Bear that in mind in any evaluation you have. The region itself is going through tremendous social, political upheaval. The Arab Spring has been hijacked. No clear mandate to the governments in the region governing in comparison to pre-Arab Spring. So that, please bear that in mind. So in that sense, I would say that in Iraq you have a reliable partner, but at the same time help us to help you in the fight against international terrorism. Somebody asked us the other day a question, a senior official said to me, he said, Lukman, let's say we get rid of ISIS. Will you be a partner with us in the fight against ISIS elsewhere? Or would you say that you're happy with just being content with Iraq? And my response was no. We know we have a responsibility. We'll take that seriously. But we also know we have an urgency now, which we want you to help us with, And let me thank both professors and the audience for the Q&A. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Before Dr. Abbas begins, I want to invite those who, I see people standing in the back. I've got some seats up front. I'm selling them for a good price.
I have a commission out of that one.
If you're too embarrassed to come down the center, you can go through the room next to this one. By all means, I want to try to get people seated. Professor Abbas, Kadhim.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for this excellent overview of the current situation in Iraq, your outlook into the future, and how the vision of the Iraqi government, and you are in this town the best to speak about what the Iraqi position is on all various issues that you addressed. I will talk, or I will take us to what we might call post-conflict Iraq, because the panel, part of the aspects of its title, deal with the future of Iraq and where Iraq is going. And just like the ambassador succinctly put his talk in a few points, I'm going to put it in 3 letters. All of them are R. So the 3 R's. Washington loves these kinds of classifications. The 3 R's would be reclaiming the Iraqi territory, reconstruction, and reconciliation. What each one of them means to me. Reclaiming, as you know, I'm fond of this word. My first academic book was Reclaiming Iraq. So the reclaiming of the Iraqi territory, it's sine qua non for any future action for Iraq. There is nothing that can be done of meaning without extending Iraqi sovereignty and Iraqi authority over the total Iraqi soil and governing the entire map of Iraq. You cannot leave ungoverned, semi-governed, or weakly governed spaces in the country and then do any kind of governing from Baghdad. This is, and it has been, one of the problems in Iraq, too many ungoverned spaces that led to flares of violence, flares of weakness, and let's face it, ISIS was a phenomenon of an ungoverned space in the country, or spaces in the country. So that is an important aspect, and it has to be coming first before the other two, and before even talking about any kind of future plans on all fronts, the extending of Iraqi authority over the total soil, getting back Mosul, getting back Anbar, and getting back those territories in a true sense, not in a fashion of squeezing a balloon where you will just take one place and the terrorists will go to the other and chase them there, leave the place you just liberated, and they keep chasing you and you are chasing them, and that is not going to work. The United States tried that in Iraq before, and we only succeeded when we moved from the squeeze the balloon kind of method to grabbing and holding the land that you liberate and then moving forward, sweeping your way until you get extend all of your authority over the entire soil. So that is the important task right now, and I think the government is aware of this and they are working that way. But there are with this you have to do more than one task. Unfortunately, for the last 12 years, Iraq has not done many issues that would have made life easier for now, not just because of the Iraqi government. Yes, the Iraqi politicians and the Iraqi political process bears much of the blame for what has not been done, but definitely there are other governing issues, arming and procurement of arms and military equipment, etc. These are all complicated processes. You know very well in this town how it goes. But definitely you have to do both of these things. Iraq needs a credible force that can do what I just said, extending the authority and keeping the authority strong, equally strong throughout Iraq, which means we have to redo the Iraqi military. Iraq right now has 10 divisions running at 50% personnel, and the rest of it, to make it functional, is really from the Hasht, the PMUs, Popular Mobilization Units. And then there are 2 divisions that were recently constructed that are at full capacity. So that is not what Iraq needs at this point. It needs much stronger. It needs an air force. It needs logistics, which is a very important part. So this process has to go both hand in hand, reclaiming the land and building a force that can be enough to hold Iraq inside Iraq in peace, and also deter future aggressions if it happens, God forbid. The second one is reconstruction. And I do not mean by reconstruction a series of contracts to restore the houses and restore the roads and whatever the war and the conflict have destroyed. But I'm talking about reconstruction in the sense of our historical understanding of the term reconstruction when I speak to an American audience, the post-Civil War United States, that era that was called the Reconstruction era. We are talking about not just the reconstruction of what was destroyed by the war, but reconstruction of politics, reconstruction of the political infrastructure, the economic infrastructure, the social infrastructure, a reconstruction of a nation that can function into the future and doesn't fall again with the next challenge into the same trouble that we were just, or we are coming out of. And that is very important. Iraq does not and should not take this task alone. I do not believe that we do have in Iraq enough expertise to do this. Iraqis, as a government, as a political class, need to be humble a little bit and look at what other countries have done in post-conflict situations, learn from their own history and the history of others, and seek as much expertise rather than invent the wheel or give the task to, again, similar to the quota system of politics in Iraq, and then end up not doing the job right and having to redo it time and again. So that is the other issue. And the third is reconciliation. And the last two, reconstruction and reconciliation, should go hand in hand. They don't have to be one after the other, because I said already, reclaiming Iraqi territory has to come first before anything else. What is reconciliation? A couple of days ago, Professor Serwer and myself were in a conference, and there was a talk about the conflict between two views: those who were urging us to think in the box, and those who were urging us to leave the box and think completely out of the box. I think here we need to think out of the box. The box in Iraq has been as the following, or as follows: reconciliation meant giving more positions to politicians from this faction or this sect or this ethnic group or that one. And if you already gave 33% of the positions to a group, and all of those politicians did such a lousy job that their own people revolted against them, giving 2 more ministries to them will not solve the problem. Out-of-the-box thinking is to look at reconstruction reconciliation where it has not been done in Iraq. Iraq, for the last 12 years, had been doing nothing other than reconciliation, but in the wrong place, among politicians. And every time a politician doesn't get a job, will go and raise, become a rabble-rouser, and then again, it's like we never done any reconciliation. You need to reconcile the people with each other. We have not done any reconciliation at the popular level. And as long as there are people who are disenchanted, disenfranchised, and I'm not talking about here one group or another. There are people who are louder and they get the media, and there are people who are silent. I can tell you that every Iraqi right now out of the ruling class is disenfranchised, disenchanted, living in subhuman conditions. It's just some people are probably less vocal about it because of their backgrounds. Let's face it. You know, if you ask every Iraqi, they will look at what they were and what they are right now. The Shia think that life is great right now because, you know, they have the same terrible position they had under Saddam Hussein, but they have their lives as a right, not a privilege anymore. So it looks better, a step forward. But I would not argue that a place in Basra you know, is better in any way of governance or services or anything like that. That is, you know, from Haditha or from any place in Diyala, Saadiya, Ba'quba, etc. It is all right now underserved. It is all unserved in many places. And the problem with Iraq right now, it is you really need to get out of that fixed idea of reconciliation by reconciling the political group to reconciling the people. If the people are content, are happy with, they are happy with the system, we know that. They are unhappy with the government and with the ruling class. No, we don't find Iraqis saying, let's go back to dictatorship or let's change the, you know, destroy what we have right now. No, they have a problem with the governance, not the constitutional framework, not the way Iraq is going. So these three things, if we start thinking about them creatively, I think we are going somewhere. If we do not, then we are not just risking, but we are guaranteed to run another round of trouble in Iraq, and the ball is in the court of the Iraqi government, the Iraqi politicians. And again, also, I would say the international community that is dealing with Iraq, because we all have to think about it in the right way. Thank you very much, and thank you again, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you, Professor Serwell, and you know.
Thank you, Abbas.
The floor is yours.
I'm going to open the floor to questions. I see the microphone that I was looking for. You'll have to come to the microphone so that the audio-visual stuff will work right, or the microphone will be brought to you if you're in an inner slot. The floor is open, and I ask you to identify yourselves before you speak. I'll take two questions at a time. One there.
Thank you very much for a very interesting panel. I wanted to pick up on the three...
Please identify yourself.
Alexander Kravitz from Insight, Iraq. Sorry about that. I wanted to pick up on the 3 R's. You know, some will make political campaigns out of it. Maybe that could, yeah. I wanted to pick up on the reconstruction one. You know, when we think of reconstruction in the United States, some would say it took 100 years, up until maybe the 1960s, for it to be really fully implemented, shall we say. But the question I have is, how do you see, I'm sorry, on the reclaiming of land? It's obvious that, you know, we have to reclaim Nineveh. That's obvious from Daesh. But what about the disputed territories between Kurdistan, the KRG, and you know, and the rest of Iraq, the disputed areas, Kirkuk, for example? I mean, how do you apply the thinking of reclaiming to those disputed territories?
Thank you. Let me take another question right here.
Thank you. Basma Fakhri, Executive Director, Iraq Foundation. I like the 3 R's too. My question is about reconciliation of people. Of course, I agree with you. It's just how you think of doing it.
Doing what?
Reconciliation of people.
At the popular, at the popular level.
Right.
Mr. Ambassador, would you like to start us off?
Sure. I mean, Kirkuk, disputed territories, and others. Sometimes people think that should be a historical discussion because the situation after ISIS has the facts has enforced itself. That might be true in maybe in a academic sense, but in realities to the history of Iraq, in which it's a tribal society, people's pride is important for them, or perceived pride is also as important. People's understanding that things were not taken under duress, but it was more in a what you might call a constructive way. For us, for the Constitution to be implemented, there are still a lot of outstanding questions. There are sometimes loopholes in the Constitution, which people have taken advantage of in that sense. So there is a lot of dialogue to be made. Getting rid of ISIS has been an important factor for all parties. That's a good sign. People are not taking advantage of that now. They no longer realize, they no longer resigned to the fact that ISIS can be used for the politics of Iraq, because everybody is losing out. The political class, majority of the Sunni politicians are in exile because of that. The Shia primarily now, although they feel safer now than before, they also know that ISIS will keep being a threat to them, and certainly with the Kurdish KRG over 1,000-kilometer border with ISIS, it's an area of threat moving forward. So in that sense, I would say the Kirkuk question is still outstanding. There is a lot of initial discussion regarding the oil share and others is there. We still haven't resolved the consensus for people counting our peoples and census. Sorry, not consensus. For the census, with that still an outstanding issue. I would say what we have done is try to do initial steps of confidence building measures. One thing which part of the 3R and part of the point is important to understand, or to highlight, sorry, and that is we are not a very reflective society. We do say mistakes for a number of reasons. And these are what you might call heritage of dictatorship. It didn't allow you to think, let alone it allowed you to have the infrastructure of civil society or others to come up to a decision, do a reflective, in a very open, constructive way, see where the box is, outside, inside the box, or others. That was not allowed. So here now we are learning democracy in a harsh way, in a tough area, in a tough neighborhood, and as a result, because we are not a very reflective, we do the same mistakes again and again. That's not something I like, but that's the reality of it as well. Time itself in the whole region is relative. I'm not talking about from an Einstein point of view here. I'm talking about in a politics point of view. Time is still relative. So it's what you might call an inshallah culture. That in itself is a very problematic issue. And by the way, this is what frustrates majority of our Western partners when they talk about it. They ask us, when they know what? We say, inshallah. What does that mean? So it's another issue to bear in mind. We need to define boxes. I give the doctor, I grant him that. We need to define boxes. That box might be a timeline or a precondition and others. But because of the myriad of parameters involved in decision making, we sometimes think that we leave it to God. That's another problem we have. So it's an area we need to look at. So I would say, to be honest, in a very open answer to you, a frank answer is that the jury is still out as to how do we resolve these disputes. There are what you might call confidence building measures. It's important that we trust each other, element of trust, because of the interdependency, which we now realize. There was they say when children are brought up, they go from dependency to independency to interdependency. We are at the interdependency phase. ISIS has taught us that we need each other, and still hasn't told us how do we need each other. That's for us to find out in our politics.
Abbas, personal reconciliation?
Yeah, just quickly, and I think there was also, I have a word or two about the reclaiming. When I spoke about reclaiming, I was speaking about reclaiming of ungoverned spaces, a space that is well governed by the region or by the federal government is fine by me at this point. Now here, maybe the ambassador and myself are coming from different points of view. He's, more with the, again, there are what the government prefers and what it
they
plans,
pay me for that, so.
and they pay you for it. But I'm talking about my personal convictions that I held all along. I think at this point, who governs Kirkuk, it doesn't matter. This is not similar to ISIS getting hold of Mosul or getting hold of a chunk of Anbar. The disputed lands between the center or the federal government and Kurdistan has to go with the reconstruction and reconciliation phase. That's where you need to decide, because at the end of the day, it makes a difference if Kurdistan is going to tomorrow to be, and tomorrow here is long-term or short-term, to be in another state. Then it matters who governs these places. If it is not, and then it becomes, who cares where 10 kilometers will fall here on there or there, square kilometers. And I think one of the things that have to be done with the reconstruction, it has to, the Iraqis have to settle the issue of the future of Kurdistan in the immediate future. There has to be a decision, a referendum, whatever it is, to end that question once and for all. And I believe that the Kurds, if they decide to go for a state, then it is their right. No one in the 21st century would tell people to stay by the hold of a gun, to stay with the country or not. But that would be the reconstruction and reconciliation phase. How do you make a reconciliation? I'm thinking here of two issues. One of them, good local governance. Good governance at the local level will deny the politicians who want to create trouble for the government, for the system, and also the other demagogues will deny them the support and backing. I supervised a thesis one day when I was in the old times at the NPS on the Oman experience and how Sultan Qaboos changed his father's heavy-handed policy from shooting at the people on the far to investing in those areas, to making their life better, to changing the place to a world-class place. And then the people who were in that area, who were raising weapons against the government, would tell their leaders, we do not really need to revolt anymore, just go away. You are looking for your political future, and we are happy with what we are getting. That's the kind of system. And again, this has to go with all of the country. There is more disenchantment in Basra than in Anbar. The other part is to think about the reconciliation. It's really to think about a national level reconciliation rather than just looking at, again, at the political class. You need to look at all of the experiences that were there, and whether, and you don't have, Iraq has different, of course, set of historical facts. You need to borrow from the others, not copy their systems. But definitely there needs to be a very good international effort. It has to be done scientifically, not the haphazard way that Iraqis have been going about it. But these are the things that I'm thinking about, is just make people's life better. You will not have politicians who will threaten you with demonstrations and ISIS every other year or every other 6 months.
As I teach these 3 R's, not the other 3 R's here at SAIS, maybe I can offer a sentence or two about the reconciliation issue, especially at the more interpersonal level. I think the literature is very clear that the absolute prerequisite for reconciliation is acknowledgement of harm. In the Iraqi case, it will have to be mutual acknowledgement of harm in several different directions. That's a very difficult thing to do. It is not easy when you feel you've been harmed to acknowledge the harm that's been done to others. But that's the step that gets you out of the spiral, the downward spiral of violence. I haven't seen it happening yet in Iraq, but I look forward to the day when it begins. I have 2 questions here somewhere, Rend, and then let me.
Thank you.
Rand, introduce
I'm
yourself.
Rendell Rahim, yes, I'm Rendell Rahim. Ambassador Faily, thank you very much for a sweeping and very candid presentation, and thank you, Dr. Kadhim. Ambassador Faily, you are ambassador in Washington, after all. We want to hear about Washington. As ambassador to Washington, and you wish to encourage United States support for Prime Minister Abadi's government and for the change that happened since September 2014. What do you ask for? What are your bullet points when you speak to the US government, to the US Congress, to ask them to support the Iraqi government? Thank
While
you.
you're contemplating revealing all the secrets of the Iraqi government, let me take one more question.
Yes, we want you to be as candid as you were in your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And my name is Ahmed Ali. I'm from the Education for Peace in Iraq Center. Thank you for the ambassador and for the Dr. Abbas for the remarks. My question is not about revealing secrets. It's about analyzing a situation that happened in Tikrit. Mr. Ambassador, you mentioned that the Iraqi Sunni tribes played a role in the clearing of Tikrit and expelling ISIS from the city. How important it is for the Iraq government to have the participation of the Iraq Sunni tribes, not only in Tikrit and in those areas, but particularly for the upcoming operation to clear Mosul?
Okay. I mean, your second question, or Ahmed's question, it's a prerequisite. It's a must prerequisite. Even if we have the capability, without the buy-in of the localities, I'm afraid there's a decision for us not to get engaged in any theater of operation, where, unless it's, for example, like a Mosul dam or something else where we think that there is catastrophic. But geopolitically, prerequisite is we get the engagement of locals. That's however it takes, whatever we need to do, we will do that. But we are determined to have the localities to participate in it. And also in what you might call, or they call it here, the post-stabilization forces. That's also another issue. So that's an area we're working on. More so in Mosul, by the way. The scale of the city, the police required, the officers, the local services need to be provided, and so on. And bear in mind that the clock is ticking, and we have refugees who are displaced inside the country. Refugees always create social upheaval in any area they go to because of the nature of that problem itself, accommodation, schools, and everything else. So we need them to go back to their homes. So it's an area we cannot afford time, but at the same time, politically, we know we need to have preconditions of localities being involved. As far as Washington is concerned, and I'm an open book, as you know, Rand. In that sense, there are quite few requests we have made. The key issue we have had hasn't been the administration. The administration has been what I might call very understanding of the challenges because of their people there, because of the traffic flow of people both sides, and because of the close relationship. There's so many conferences and others where the Prime Minister has met senior officials, whether it's Davos, London, Paris, elsewhere, Jeddah and others. However, we do have an issue with Congress for them to appreciate the politics of us. An issue of blaming everything on Prime Minister Maliki, we need to move away from that. We need to look at the core issues and the core challenges we face because of the common interest we have. So understanding our politics in the nuances of it is a mission for us to do. We are here to sell our project. We need customers, we need others to buy into it. We need to explain that, and the Prime Minister is here to do that. We also need to appreciate that there are certain politics in Washington where both houses and where there is a partisan, bipartisan, cross-party issue, and we need to understand that and communicate our concern. We do need the U.S. support, and sometimes that does mean that we need to not just appreciate the politics here, but we want them to appreciate our politics as well as a partner moving forward. As I said, the project we have at hand in the region is not It's not a vision of somebody, but of necessity of the fight against ISIS. So here it's important for us to cooperate, understand each other, and I would say not just work with each other, but synchronize our approach to this. Here, the United States has an important role in the region. Their partners need to be our partners moving forward. Our mission needs to be embraced by them as well. Iraq is a democratic entity. People like it or not, that's the reality of it. People have that decision. With all the upheaval we have had over the 12 years, the trend of democracy moving forward in relation to elections, at least. People tell me that elections is not democratic, in itself is not democracy. I give you that for granted. But it's a key indicator. It's a pretty important prerequisite for it. It's moving in the right direction at a very high cost. Our people want to move as far as away from dictatorship. And the last elections and the incoming new Prime Minister of Abadi is a sign that people, for us, want to move away from any dictator. Whether he's a Sunni, Shi'i, Kurds, or whatever, that's not an issue. We need to move away from that. And we're here to tell that project to the Americans. Support in intelligence sharing, ammunitions, other things as well, is important. Also, with the post-Yemen situation, polarizations are taking place in the region. We're saying to them, we are the fault lines in this polarization. We have all the isms of that region, whether it's Shi'ism, Sunnism, nationalism, Arabism, anything you have. Iraq is a fault line in that aspect, in relation to oil prices and everything else. Appreciate the fault line situation. An earthquake has taken place in that fault line, stabilized, supported. And it's important for our American partners to hear it from the Prime Minister himself and his delegation that this is what we're here for. Economical support moving forward because of the current prices we have. So there are a lot of issues. Is this what you might call the determinant visit? I would say no. It needs to be one among many for friends to have that discussion. And same in traffic flow in Baghdad as well. It's important for that. We shouldn't have our politics by exception. It should be the norm in resolving it. That there is a lot of work to do. Frank discussions about Iran. That's an area. We will be open about that. We have never been secretive about it. We don't have any secretive deals, no secret handshakes or anything like that. It's a clear problems we have. It's a clear present danger we have. We need to address that. Iran have faced same. We'll have that discussion with them. And we need to understand where do we fit in relation to the post-nuclear discussion. What's the status of Iraq in that aspect of it? Where do we fit in the post-Yemen situation? Where do people want to put it on the right or left on this polarization? We don't want to be on either side. We have important challenges for our own country. So these are areas which will have that frank discussion.
It's better to have questions.
Please, one here, and then I'll try to get to this side next to you.
Thank you very much. Tolga Tanis with Hürriyet Turkish Press. I had three specific quick questions actually. First, you mentioned about the Mosul operation and the involvement of the localities. What do you mean with the participation of the localities? In what level the Baghdad government is expecting the participation from the localities? Because there was recently a background briefing by the CENTCOM officials, and they said that in April or May, there will be a operation in Mosul. There might be operation in Mosul, and it's up to the Baghdad decision, they said. Is it a realistic forecast first in terms of this operation and the participation of the localities? And secondly, the Yemen thing. What is the position of Baghdad government about an idea to form an army within the Arab League countries, especially which will be used sometimes for the groups maybe oriented by the Tehran government? And the third one, in terms of your relations with Turkey, how would you characterize the cooperation with Turkey between the Turkish government and Baghdad government in terms of the struggle against terrorism that you mentioned in your speech making?
Only the Turks get 3 questions.
Hi, Margaret Rogers. I'm a consultant. I just returned from my 4th job in Iraq. I was with Mercy Corps for a year based in Baghdad, and I started working in Iraq in 2005. I appreciate the 3 Rs too, and the challenges with starting with the reclaiming Iraq. While you've addressed these challenges, I would like you to try to be a little more explicit. What I see as the major media coverage of Iraq from a Westerner's standpoint is one, the sectarianism, that there's a war within Islam and this is overwhelming the Middle East. Is in fact that what's really going on. The second one is Iran controls Baghdad. The third one is Iraq is actually broken forever now into 3 or 4 countries and cannot be put back together. Because you know the challenges of persuading our policymakers to support Iraq, given the Americans' desire to withdraw. I think there has to be, you have to make a more compelling case that there's hope in Iraq. So just try to make your message stronger about how you're going to address these key areas.
Mr. Ambassador?
Okay. I mean, I'll answer the second questions, or second 3 questions, I think. Hope, the whole project is about hope. The suffering of having car bombs in every district, poor districts in Shia towns and villages and suburbs of Iraq, all over the last 12 years, has been about hope. That's what they have suffered, and the high proportion representation at the elections has been about hope. People talk about that there is a marginalization of Sunnis and others, but in reality, if you look at the car bombings and everything else, all been in Shia towns. So I think people are reading things as they want to read it, not in the reality of it as well. We may not have been doing a good job of talking about the country with numbers and so on, maybe. But going back to the key point, we are developing a new country based with the ashes of dictatorship all over, with the traces of culture of violence all over. That's key important point for people to realize that. I'm not giving you the blame, I'm just giving you a diagnosis of the problem, which means that the 3 Rs and the governance, which is a key important attribute, is still missing there. We need it. We need more decentralization. I can assure you, I have seen vice ministers, sometimes ministers, certainly director generals, who say, well, ambassador, it's not for me to make that decision. They will always want to take it upward. That's the culture they come from. And they want to, they don't want to be blamed for any change. Without having an adventure, entrepreneurship, risk-taking, how do you want to develop your society? That's an area, and these are social characteristics which takes time, may take generations, but we have to get the right step. So going to the key issues, whether sectarian and among Islams or not. Well, I know that was took in relation to Boko Haram or in Algeria, or sorry, not Algeria, Tunisia recently, and in Paris. This wasn't the Sunni Shia situation. This was an entity calls itself Islamic, where it's not Islamic, but tries to have a political power. It's all about power. There are ideological bases for some of them. I'm not denying that. But I'm saying that as much as I was in England for a long time, the Northern Ireland situation wasn't about Catholic per se because of their Catholic. That was all about power. In relation to Protestant. It wasn't that IRAs were ideologically Catholic organization. It wasn't that. It was all about power and vice versa. So here is an issue we need to distinguish. Otherwise, if we go into the Sunni Shia situation, then unfortunately everybody else will miss out. Because this organization seeks to destroy the norms of nation states. They want to declare their own paradigm where nations are where diversity is not allowed. Let's put it this way. That's an important aspect to bear in mind. In relation to Iran and our relationship with Baghdad, controls Baghdad or not, well, somebody asked me today, a journalist, and he looked I think he did the PhD about the Iraq-Iran war and others. And I said to him, by the way, Iraq still has major challenges with Iran in relation to 1975 Algeria agreement. We still haven't signed. We still don't agree to sign it now, after 12 years. So that, I think, is a clear sign that an issue, if we have control, as people talk about that, surely we would have signed that ages ago. So here is an issue of nationalism. And we wouldn't. We have a need with Iran. We have a desire or the neighbor, as much as you have Mexico and with your problems with the migration, or Canada. I don't know what problems you have with Canada. I hope you not. But anyway, let's have that.
We fought several wars with them.
Yeah, but well, the other issue is that the Canadians always want to be American, and America want to be Canadian. That's another issue. But as much as that problem we have with Iran, it's not an issue of we don't want Iran to get involved. No, we do want them to get involved because we have a common threat. But at the same time, do we want them to control? No. We, by the way, last week, our Prime Minister met with the leaders of the Congress and the Senate, and he said to them, in my recent discussions with Iranian officials, they said, well, because of Iranian pilgrimage coming over there and the freedom in Iraq, that we are posing a threat to the Iranian national interest with freedom. Maybe that's true or not. It doesn't matter. The point is, we are distinct and we want to have our own way of life, and we respect the neighbor, and we have common threats. And let's not forget, they were the first to provide offer, unconditional. For others, there was a lot of conditionality. Moving as to the point of Mosul and the operations and so on, the level of change has to be the tribes, and it has to be the Peshmerga get involved in it. And it has to be that the various communities in Mosul play part in it as well. We don't want to do it without the Peshmerga, because we need to think about the day after scenario. What's their role moving forward? We don't want to resolve one problem, create other problems for us. That's one issue we need to address. So the Peshmerga being involved in Mosul is a very important sign for us of a commitment of all parties to get rid of ISIS. ISIS is a problem for the whole society, not just for localities. It's a change you have to bear in mind. So as far as Yemen is concerned, we have said we do in principle support having a formation of Arab army to deal with issues, but Yemen's is not the right project to implement that. The problems are more domestic. People are projecting it as a regional problem. It's more domestic issues need to be addressed. We need to give them the leeway. We need to support them. And certainly, we think it's need to be a more political discussion rather than a military solution to it. I don't think there has been given enough breathing space for the politics to play part before playing a role, military role. And in relation to Turkey, if we compare the relationship like a year ago, 18 months ago, I think we have a lot of good traffic flow between the two countries, the leaderships. The Prime Minister has been there, the Prime Minister of Turkey has been to Iraq, and I would say it's a more predictable relationship. We appreciate the issues of the threat Turkey claim in relation to its own terrorism problems, domestic problems, but at the same time, we say, please don't compare IS with any other organization. This is too big a problem. This is too regional a problem. Regions, Turkey has to play a significant role in stabilizing in Syria. And for us, Iraq, without resolving Syria, we will always have our back window open. We need to close that. We need to get some better discourse into the politics of resolving Syria. No, the timing which was talked about was not an Iraqi timeline. We drive this. We need help. We support, but we drive this. And any timeline anybody talks about, that's for them to explain, not for us.
I'll catch this one in the back row.
Thank you. Johnny Dilan from Voice of America Kurdish Service. The many core issues between the central government and Kurdistan region hasn't been addressed so far. If this continue, what guarantee that you have that Kurdistan region or the Kurds will stay with Iraq? The popular mobilization forces of Al-Hashd al-Shabi has been seen as Iraqi Revolutionary Guards. There is a lot of fears and hesitation that if Daesh was crushed, they will turn their gun toward the Kurds. there's any guarantee that this is not going to happen? Thanks.
Thank
you, and let me take one here, too.
Balayan Saleh. Mr. Ambassador, thank you very much. My question is regarding the participation of the Peshmerga in liberation of Mosul. The question is, while Baghdad is cutting the budget from the Kurdish employees and cutting all the sources from Baghdad to the Kurds, why Peshmerga should participate in a fight which is not its own fight? And Peshmerga right now, from Kobani to Khanaqin, they are fighting ISIS. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm astonished by somebody saying it's not their fight. 1,000-kilometer border, a threat to all Yazidis, other minorities, Christians and others, a threat to Erbil, destruction of property, culture, heritage, destabilizing unity of a country. It's all signs of somebody's fight. I would think with ISIS, it's everybody's fight. It can't be just somebody's fight. Well, I don't want to talk about the geography of the Kurds. Well, I don't want to talk about the geography of the Kurds. I have some of my own views here. But what I would say is it's a fight for humanity, for civil law, for integrity of persons, let alone of nations, of states, to prevail. That's what the key issues we have here. The ISIS is a threat in ideological and physical sense to not just the heritage, but to the future of our societies in the region. By the way, let me be clear. When I talk about ISIS, I don't talk about the brand of ISIS. I'm talking about the ideas of ISIS. I'm talking about the way they projected it or has been materialized. Where, let's forget, if I'm ISIS and I want to change the name, I'm talking about that new name, the new mutation of ISIS. We had Al-Qaeda before. People thought that this is locality, need to be contained. They found that it can't be contained. More passports of different nations are now with have affiliation to ISIS than any other day before. More European than others. We find them in Baghdad and elsewhere, in Iraq and elsewhere. So here we're talking about a threat to the stability of the region. If players in the region don't take that upon themselves, then they shouldn't call about international support. We need to take ownership of that problem ourselves. If it's ideological, we need to address it. If it's regional problems, if it's geopolitical, we need to address it. There is enough wealth in Iraq to suffice every society. We need to. Enough wealth in relation to natural resources, heritage, history, and so on. So there is a bigger picture. The Kurds and everybody else need to be strategic in their thinking. Is it just use that for now or move forward? And this is where saying, by the way, let me be clear as well. The Kurds have always sought independence. They have the right for that. They joined the project after 2003, after 14 years or 13 years of independence after 1990. So they have joined the projects, agreed to the constitution. We all need to work together to define that, understand the limitation, revise that constitution, coexist, have that interdependency. If they want independence, then let's have that different chat about it. But let's not associate that with ISIS. ISIS is a bigger threat for us than all. I think that's a niche. I think we need to mature up to that fact. Otherwise, let's not call for international support. And that's one aspect.
Did that cover? Oh, sorry.
Sorry. I think the issue regarding salaries and everything else, the PM was there recently. There has been some payments made. It's an issue. It's ongoing discussion. I don't see the Iraqi politics as what you might call a key milestone. I see it as a gradual development. That gradual development means more confident building measures, one step at a time. Fair enough. It's a marathon run. I don't see it as a 100 yards or 400 yards or any sprint run. It has to be a marathon run. We need to have that building measures. We should be less conditional in our discussions, simply because I think the threat is bigger. the integrity, not just the state of Iraq in the sense of 1920 borders. I'm talking about the coexistence of society. The last thing I want to see is less strategic relationship between communities because of a threat or because of fear or because of intimidation of each other. Your neighbors will not move away if you have a border or not. They will stay with your neighbors. And sorry, about the Voice of America first questions regarding Al-Hashd and the KRG and so on. I think I tried to answer that. The Hashd is a natural, healthy development once a state wasn't able to protect its citizens. Should we be in these positions? No. We should have only the army and so on. But is it a necessity we had to deal with that? Yes. Are we working in resolving the day after scenario in relation to how do we let the state have the control? We're talking about National Guard and other discussions and so on. It's a long project for us. It's not the neat project, but it's a necessity for us to work on. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. I'm going to use these last few minutes to see if you, Abbas, and the Ambassador have something to add.
I'm going to yield to the Ambassador because he is the guest of honor, but I was going to answer a question I think that remained unanswered from the lady to me. No, that's all right. It's fine. On the media, that's the part that I'm going to talk about. There seems to be a lot of, again, we all appreciate the press and its role, and we can't live without it. But beyond
I can't live without it.
Yeah, well, you love to do
make that declaration.
But beyond that, I think that there seems to be an alarming groupthink among the reports that are about Iraq, about what is going on. It seems like all of the the reporters, depends on whether they report for a conservative, a liberal, an American, whatever. All of them speak in the same language, talk about the same things, looking for the same troubles to report on. And when they don't find anything, they just look for anything. The first, here is one of the biggest battles that happened in Iraq. Major liberation of Tikrit is a major event that is probably the most important event since Mosul was taken. And what does the first report from Agence France Presse on it? The Hashd looted some shaving cream and toothpaste. And I'm kidding you not. You go back to that report, and that's what they were looking for before the fridge problem came about. That's sad. There is also seems to be a tone of the people conflating the Shia and Iran and the Shia and Hezbollah, and there is a deep-rooted or some really deep symptoms of anti-Shiism among so many experts in the West, so many journalists. I'm speaking here before someone who wrote the book, one of the earliest, and it's a classic book on the Arab Shia, Dr. Rand Rahim, that co-authored book, and no one can skip it, reading and looking at how the narrative has been formed. Unfortunately, those who control the media from the government side, from the Shia side, seem to be, meet that with silence. They do not want to escalate, and that is backfiring, because if you do not control the narrative, or at least balance the narrative, the other side will become the truth to many minds. Remember, you are dealing with people who don't have the nuances and the inner sense of what goes on there. So there is a lot of, I think, when you read all reporters talking about the same thing, there is a problem. Either one is taking from the other, and we all know about that. The experience from 2003, 2007, how many awards were taken from the five-star hotels in the green zone, where people would send poor Iraqis to report and then just put it in nice English and send it back to New York or to Washington. All of that, and when you go and investigate, none of the reporting was really going on. And same thing here. It is easy to think in the journalistic box and to say the same thing because you don't have to be challenged. And there are a few exceptions here and there, but that is just follow Twitter. It's just amazing. I wouldn't call it conspiracy, but amazing, agreement, let's put it that way, quote unquote, among all of these people who love to disagree on everything, yet they agree to the last point and last dot and last cross T on, talking about the hashd and all of that. And if you don't find anything, how about shaving cream and, toothpaste? Again, I think I took what I needed to take. The ambassador.
Mr. Ambassador.
2 points. I think it's important for people to appreciate Iraq in a sense of one parameter, which is to do the balance between justice and peace. It's a tribal society. An issue of justice or perceived justice is very important. But at the same time, they want to move forward and bring stability and peace to their society. How do we get that balance? If we look at all the experiences, whether it's Northern Ireland or South Africa or elsewhere, Belgium or elsewhere, the key issue we have here is how do we balance those two parameters, justice and peace? It's a difficult formula for us. We are trying to get it right, but it's an ongoing project. So please bear in mind, whenever you look at Iraq in that mindset as well. That's one of the boxes. The other issue, which I'll finish with, is that the level of change required within the Iraqi society is different than in the majority of other Arab countries. In other countries, more so with the Arab Spring, peoples were disagreeing in Egypt and elsewhere. What is the level of change? Is it just, for example, the presidency or the system of government or the whole state or the whole nation state, or the type of government, royalties versus Republican and so on? That type of discussions is no longer taking place in Iraq. ISIS tried to define their own narrative, but apart from that, it's all to do with the nuances of the politics, which means it's a good sign for us to work on. We need to resolve the governance. People still associate democracy with services. Well, there are two different requirements. You can have the best Democrat, but doesn't mean that they are the best governors. That's an area for us to work with. International support in those types of parameters will be very helpful, but please bear in mind the uniqueness of Iraq. And my final point is, please don't look at Iraq through the prisms of Iran or any other isms. It needs to be looked at in its own unique way. It's not an easy formula to read. It's not a clear sense. It's a very blurry picture. But that uniqueness has what I hope the American appreciated more than any else because of the last 12 years project. However, we have no desire but to have good relationship with all countries, including the United States. We may not say thank you enough. That's part of our culture, unfortunately. But we do mean that, and we do need and want to have that relationship with the United States strategically. Thank you.
Mr. Ambassador, Abbas Kadhim, it's in our culture to say a loud thank you to you,
thank you, sir,
for being so frank with us, and for, you are a marathoner, and I guess we're only halfway through this session, but our time has run out, and it is time to thank you very much for a terrific hour and a half.